Is anger your go-to emotion?
Or when asked, how are you? Is I'm fine your knee-jerk reaction? If you've answered yes to any of these two questions, this conversation is for you. Today's topic, unlocking emotions, your access to asking for what you truly desire.
Welcome to the Influencer's Journey Show. My name is Suzanne Hart.
And I'm Taria Hodge.
And the big question is, how does the average entrepreneur like us, who started with limited time, zero marketing budget, and little to no presence, get their authentic message into the marketplace?
And what skills must you learn? And most importantly, who are you required to become to magnetically attract your divine client and build a loyal following?
Hello.
Hello. I'm super excited for this conversation today.
Are you really?
Yes, I am.
It's an interesting topic. So just want to paint a picture of how it came to be. Because so if you're a super achiever listening, you know that Tree and I, when we get together, we have these deep, juicy conversations that go all over the place. And in the mastermind, we've recently been doing emotional mastery. And as I have prepared and done my research and just, looked at ways to present this difficult actually topic in ways where people grasp it and understand it, there was this one thing that kept popping up, Taria, and it was that we have like three emotions, right? When you ask people how you doing, they're like, oh, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry.
Oh.
And as I began to unpack it, I realized how limiting this is in our ability to manage our emotions and how limiting it is in our ability to just communicate and ask for what we need in difficult times.
It's really interesting because once again, that's it for me. And I know my go-to emotion is anger. So in my
We'll, we'll
mind,
get to more about that.
so in my mind, I'm always laying hands. But I think I really got present to it when a couple of years ago, a few years ago, when we went on the retreat in Panama. And of course, if our super achievers haven't heard about my experience getting stuck in the tree on the zip line, one of the things that I know for me, I went into like angry and I was not a very happy camper. And everyone around me had the opportunity to feel, the ramification of my anger. But it wasn't until I sat down and had conversations with you to unpack it, what I learned that anger wasn't really the true emotion that I was feeling. There were a lot of other things,
Mm-hmm.
like fear, insecurity, all of that other,
Loss of control.
the loss of control, all of those other things were just underneath there, just being masked by anger. And I love when you said to me, like, wow, just imagine if you were able to express what you were really going through at the time, how beautiful it would have been to be able to communicate that with the others who were in the situation with me and possibly give them the opportunity to show up and give me the support that I needed.
Mm.
That was so huge for me. So once again, I'm so excited to sit down and talk about this and flush through it for our super achievers, because I think it's the thing that a lot of people really struggle with, how to express their emotions.
Right. When we ask someone, how do you feel? It's a big question. And
Mhm.
I think we ask it so kind of casually. And unless you have language for it, it's a big blank question, truly. So I'm excited. I'm excited. So if you were just joining us, if you're a super achiever and just joining us, please welcome, first of all. Let us know who you are and where you are joining us from. As you jump on, let us know what you do, put it in the comment section, and who you serve, right? So who are your people? Who's your tribe? And we want to know what brought you out today. What was it about this topic that had you stop? If you have questions, put it in the comments section. If you have comments, put it in the comments section. We're going to ask you to light up the chat and not only talk to us, talk and network with each other. If you're listening to the replay, definitely hashtag replay. That's how we know you're listening to the replay. And do the exact same thing. Let us know who you are, where you're joining us from, who are you called to serve, what you do while you're living, and get involved in the conversation. Act like we're right there with you as you're watching the replay, and just get into communication.
Awesome. And then also, as a special thank you for taking the time to join us in this conversation today, you will have the opportunity to grab the Mindset Mastery Playbook. And this conversation comes from exactly that, Mindset Mastery. So you'll have the opportunity to grab the 5 secrets to unlocking your potential and elevating your leadership. And in this exclusive playbook, it reveals how to tap into drive, passion, and the focus that's needed to create massive results. In other words, how to become unstoppable. And then before we jump into our conversation, if this is your first time on our Influencers Journey channel, take a moment to go ahead and hit the subscribe button below the video. Why do you want to subscribe? You want to subscribe because you want to know every time we do our show, Influencers Journey Show, so you can join us and be a part of the conversation. And then lastly, go ahead and share this conversation with another super achiever.
Wow. Let's get this going, Tria. So if you are just joining us, if you're a super achiever just tuning in, welcome back to the Influencers Journey Show. Our topic today is unlocking emotions, your access to asking for what you truly desire. My name is Suzanne Hart, and I am here hanging out with my girl, Tria Hodge. Okay, my dear. You know, one of the things as we were talking and as we were preparing for this yesterday, we started talking about above board emotions. And I really love that term because when I think of our emotions, I always have this picture, and you know, of this iceberg. And there's the water, and then there's a part of the iceberg that's outside, and then there's a part of the iceberg that's hidden. I think that's the dangerous part, that's below the first surface that no one can see. We don't know how deep it goes. We don't know a lot about it. So what do you mean when you say, when you start talking to me about above board emotions? Because it was right on the money.
Yeah, so it's like you said to the top, one of the things when people ask us, how are you doing? You know, I'm fine, I'm happy, or what are you feeling right now? I'm sad, or what are you angry? And then that's it. And that's to the extent of our expression of our emotions. And I liked it when you challenged me to sit down and say, no, go past the anger. Because is it anger really? What is it that you're feeling? And that was such a big revelation for me because it uncovered the vulnerable emotions, the things that we don't walk around and share with others readily. So do we walk around and say that, oh my gosh, I feel loss of control in this situation? Or, you know, one of the things that I experienced was everybody else seemed to be calm. And literally, I was the only one freaking out. And so, you know, I'm comparing myself. That was another thing. I'm comparing myself. Like, why am I feeling this way? And they're not feeling any of it. So what's wrong with me? So I'm analyzing it. And it's a whole bunch of stuff that's going through my mind at the time. And it's just being masked by anger. And I think that that's the thing, is to challenge ourselves when we get into situations. If you could do it in the moment, is great. But if you can't do it in the moment, just come back and do some reflective work around it and ask yourself, like, what's really, you know, going on? So to move past the things that are comfortable for us to say. And that's the thing that stands out for me. I think that we're all comfortable with giving those three emotions, right? Oh, I'm happy, but are you really happy? Or is it joy? Or are you feeling gratitude? What is it that you're really feeling? And be able to unpack that and express it to others.
It is interesting because I think a big part of it in my mind is we express the emotions that are socially acceptable, right? And we know that big boys don't cry. Girls don't get angry. Never let them see you sweat. So don't let them know you're afraid. Like, we have all these things that are part of our kind of societal conversation that really tell us what we are allowed to express and what is okay to express. So we're able to express anger, right? We are able to express sorrow to a point. I'm sad. And of course, we can express happiness. I think when we get beyond that, the world kind of goes, okay, whoa.
That's too much.
I wasn't really asking, right? This is a bit much. I don't really want to know. And I think we know that, and we know it from a very, very, very young age. I mean, we've grown up with things like sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. So that already tells you that when words hurt you and you internalize and you have all these things, you're really not allowed to say anything other than I'm angry. They made me mad. You can't go further down and say anything else, because our society has given us this rule book, if you will, on what we're allowed to say.
And it's really interesting because two things are coming up for me. So the first thing that's coming up for me is, wow, how do we get better at when we do ask the question, how are you? What are you feeling? To have somebody create the space, because that's always my thing. How well do we create the space and in the environment for people to be vulnerable? So, what does that look like? What can we start to pay attention to? So when we ask, how are you? We are genuinely asking, how are you? And then we're preparing ourselves to really listen.
I think in order for that to happen, I think we need to be, one, present to there are below the surface emotions, which is kind of like the next point we want to get into. There are below the surface emotions, and these below the surface emotions give us access to something. And so if I am not aware that there are these below the surface emotions that isn't spoken about, I'm not going to create the space for it, nor am I going to create the environment for it. If I'm not comfortable, or I've been conditioned that we don't talk about those below the surface emotions, then it's not going to happen. I think one of the beautiful things about the mastermind, our freestyle program, I mean, pretty well all our programs, is I think because, one, we know that there are below the surface emotions. Two is we're comfortable dealing with, naming, and getting into the messiness of those below the surface emotions, that we actually are able to create an environment where people can, when we really ask, like, how are you feeling? What's going on? People know we're asking a bigger question. Right. And I think when people answer, and most people will answer on the surface, because that's the habit, it's like, well, what's that mean? Tell me a little bit more about that. And then you start to get they will start to go below.
Right.
And I think it is really, to your point, I think in order for us to even get there, we have to know there is a place we need to get to.
Yeah.
And I think secondly, you, I, and everybody listening, every super achiever out there also needs to do the work to feel comfortable coming face to face with those emotions.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it was good, because that's what it's truly all about. And so, as you were talking and sharing, the second thing that came up for me as, I listened to this and I really, turned it over, is how pigeonholed we become when people lock us in to the
Mhm.
three emotions. And so one of the examples that comes to mind is, the saying, the angry Black woman.
Mhm.
We were talking, that was like the first thing that popped into my mind, the angry Black woman. And I was just like, wow, is she really an angry Black woman? Or is there so many other things that are going on that are masked by anger? And if we all got better, at listening, communicating and listening, we will get to the heart of what's going on. And then we will truly find out that it's not really anger. It's a lot of other things that's going on
Mhm.
below.
And it's such a great example, because really, if you walk a day in the life of my sisters, right? If you spend some time getting to know a Black woman, in my mind, you'd wonder, why isn't she mad
Mhm.
in certain moments? And I think what's below the surface as you're talking about it is, all the emotions that come with not being fully in control of your destiny,
Right.
right? So there's the frustration, there's the hurt. It hurts when someone treats you and has you um be less than.
Mhm.
There is shame that one carries when you want to accomplish something, and in front of your children, your family, you are dismissed in
Mhm.
a way that is almost with disdain and disgust. And yes, you now have to keep your head held high while absorbing that interaction, and feeling the shame of not being able to do something because you don't want to escalate the situation. So there's so much below the surface that is the barrage of day to day to day, that it's like the firecracker that pops up. However, when we look deeper,
Mhm.
and if we're interested, and I think that's the key thing, is, I have learned through my years of, family work, group work, individual work, that I have to be curious to actually know what's really going on with anybody. Because oftentimes, remember, those board, above the surface emotions are really there also to protect us.
Yeah.
Side says we can talk about this, so I'm not going any deeper. And I think it is when we are willing to say, I'm going to create the space and the environment where it's safe to go deeper, and I'm going to be curious and not judgmental, because I want to understand what's really going on for you.
Mhm.
That we actually create environments where people are willing to risk sharing what's really happening.
I love it. So we talked a lot about above board emotions. Okay, so what are what are like the below the surface, the deeper ones, and why is it so important that we need to pay attention to the below the surface emotions?
It always, whenever we talk about this, it brings me back to when I got divorced. So I want you to picture I am in this new apartment in this new city slash town. I've just quit my job, sold my house, um, got divorced, left my kids in another city because they're old enough and they're not. And here I am laying on the floor in this empty apartment because I actually don't have enough stuff to put in it. So I have a kitchen table, I have a chair in the corner, I have a bed, and I have a desk. That's the extent of it. And I have my clothes. And as I lay there, Taria, I am overcome with such sadness. And so I think, and I would say sadness, and my first realization was sadness and loss. And I was just so sad. And what confused me was I had initiated this whole thing. I asked for the divorce. I led the charge on all the stuff that was going. I quit my job. I did all these things. And I was like, why am I feeling so sad? When I was able to, one, sit with it and talk it through, I wasn't, sorrow, sadness was there. But below the surface, the first thing I realized I was experiencing is a sense of loss, right? A sense of loss of my home, a sense of loss of a marriage, a sense of loss of all these things. And as you go a little deeper, I was actually beginning to grieve.
Right, grief.
Yeah, and people are like, okay, grieving, and I was grieving an idea I had. I was grieving, and I'm going to use the word fantasy because I think all young girls and young women, when we say I do,
I'm gonna say fantasy. I'm gonna use the word ideal.
ideals, okay. It's all that wrapped up into to one. And I was grieving the loss of these things and uncertain if I would have them.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was able to name it that I was able to work through it.
Yeah.
And I think even when we go back to you and I asked you, you know, to go deeper, it was when you began to go deeper that you started talking about being afraid, feeling out of control. You started talking about it never dawned on you to ask for help.
Right.
And as you went deeper, we talked about shame, we talked about hiding, like we talked about all these things that were these below the surface emotions. Because I know as I laid on the floor at my place and my divorce, I also had immense shame, right? As I had in my mind failed.
Right.
So there's all these emotions below the surface. And until we're able to name them and talk through them, I don't truly believe that we get to
Right.
release them and
really
let them go.
because what I'm really appreciating what you're saying is until you put the true emotion or one of the emotions, I know there were many, but the ones that stood out for me is grief. And so wow, like when you really take a look at grief, look at all the support and everything that we have for people who are grieving. There's a whole process that you work through when you're grieving. Now, unfortunately, people apply that only to the loss of death. Okay, and they go into that, but grief shows up in so many other places in our lives, like not just a divorce. I know definitely for me, what you experienced and felt and you communicated, I definitely felt that going through my divorce, but it's also the loss of a job. People go through immense grief over things. So just imagine you saying, well, oh, I know what this is, and there's a process that I could go through and I could work through to help me in this journey. So I think that that's like so powerful when we are able to put our finger on the pulse of what's going on with us, then we know the places to look for or the people to turn to help us get through.
And I think what the other part is that is so important is we empower or disempower ourselves through the language we use.
Mhm.
And and we also see things, if that makes sense, through the language we use. I mean, the reason we teach storytelling and the reason storytelling works, it's language that paints pictures and it's language that evokes emotions. And why I'm highlighting this is when I put language and I'm able to do the work to put language to how I am feeling, the below the surface stuff, I'm now able to understand it. I'm now able to process it. I'm now able, it goes from abstract and unclear to almost like it's like someone wiped the dust off the mirror and you can actually see yourself. Right? And so I think we don't understand the power and importance of being able to name something.
Right.
And work through to being able to name it and say, yeah, that's it. That's what's going on.
And that's what I call the work.
The ongoing, continuous work.
Work.
You know, I want to bring it back a little bit too, because we're talking about emotions, and oftentimes when we're talking about emotions, Turia, people take it outside of business. They take it outside of their careers. They take it outside of their their solopreneurship, if you will.
Mhm.
Because when we start talking about emotions like shame, blame, anger, shame, blame, guilt, grief, the list goes on. When we start talking about those, I don't think people put that in the context of going to their business, going to their job, going to these places. And I think we also don't often give credit to the amount of emotions we go through as we try to move a business forward, move an idea forward, take a risk and put something into the space, get up after failing. And I think why this is so key, one, in getting clarity for ourselves so that we can get beyond failing and keep moving. I think as a storyteller, being able to have language for what happened for me when I fell down makes my storytelling way more impactful. So there's a difference between saying I'm angry and saying, when that happened, I was so hurt. And it touched a place of shame inside me that I hadn't felt in such a long time. And all I could do was to get angry because I didn't want anybody to know the level of shame I was feeling. Now, that's a very different narrative and picture than just I was angry.
Yeah.
And I think as content creators, as storytellers, as people who are really intrigued by their mindset, I think when we start to put language to these these below the surface emotions, it gives us more
Yeah.
in our communication.
Yeah, and I love it because as you know, we're talking about this. One of the things stand out for me in the space that I'm in, definitely is social media. And people have come to me, and the common statement is, I don't like social media. And what exactly does that mean? And it took me once again, a while to really understand and say, well, something, what is it that you don't like, about social media? Is it the technological part of it, or is there something else that's going on? And what I've come to find out, it is social media is that vulnerable space. But people don't
Mhm.
walk around and say, I feel vulnerable. I feel like all eyes on me. I feel exposed. People don't walk around using, that terminology. And so it wasn't until I started to learn to put language to what my experience on social media, has been, is I'm still journeying through it, as a strategist, but and a content creator is like playing both sides, right?
Mhm.
But it's that thing. I know what inconsistency feels like. So there's times
Yeah.
that you're able to show up and you're hot on social media, and then there's other times, well, everything goes dark. And I had to really get present to that. So what's really going on in those moments? And then when I started to unpack it, it's usually those moments when we're hiding. So something has happened, whether it's on the business, the personal front, something has happened has that's made us feel like we have to go and retreat and
Mhm.
hide out. And it wasn't until I started to put that type of languaging, into my copy and have it in my conversations with people, people start to say, oh yeah, that's exactly what it is.
That's how I'm
That's how
feeling.
I'm feeling. But before, they just stood in the place, well, I don't like social media. It's not for me. I don't want to do it. But,
Mhm.
go deeper. Like what is it about it that you don't like? Okay.
Mhm.
Is it comparison? Is it sitting in perfection? Is it, the fear of not just failing, but failing publicly? All of that stuff is wrapped up into it.
Not good enough.
Mhm, mhm,
All those things. I mean, and when you think of speaking, it's the same parallel process. People will say, I'm afraid of speaking. I don't like to speak. However, when you go deeper, you will learn that there's something there. And it's not a don't like, it's a protection. And I'm protecting myself by not taking the stage so I don't experience this thing I'm afraid of,
mhm.
right? That caused me great blank before.
Yeah.
That totally embarrassed me, that totally humiliated me, that had me in such doubt of my skills, all those things. And so it is really so important to unpack.
All right. So I'm gonna switch gears just a little bit, and I'm gonna ask you, is emotional mastery the key to influence?
Ah, such a good question. And I will say yes. And I'll say yes because when things are going good, almost everybody's a good leader. Yeah.
I love that.
When when things are going just clicking along and everything's all the ducks are falling into line and everything's going beautifully, most people are great leaders. However, I truly believe leadership is tested and truly shows up when things aren't going well. When the stress is high,
Mhm,
the environment is hot,
mhm.
there's a lot of risk, and we're under a time crunch and we don't have answers. Let me just paint the picture. That's when you find out who your leaders are because they are the people who will influence the environment by how they show up.
Yeah.
And these are the individuals that have such a level of mastery over their emotional state that they can feel something and choose a different behavior. They can be going through something and say, this is not going to move me at this point in time, so I'm going to do this, or I'm going to have to deal with this after we're done this. And I think that level of knowing yourself, mastering your emotions so you can powerfully serve and get to an outcome is what defines leaders and leadership for me. It's a level of emotional mastery that I truly believe very few people have.
Yeah. And but that's the key to it right there. It's work in progress. You know, that's my favorite thing. It's all work in progress.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's that dance between how much do I show and how do I attend to the emotions of everybody around me so that I can keep moving them. And it's this really interesting dance because I know in the when I worked in crisis, I had to manage my emotions, and it was almost like I had to put them over here while attending to the emotions of everybody else so that we could get to that outcome. All right. So my question for you is, how has emotional mastery helped you control your anger? Because you joke all the time, I just want to fight somebody, Suzanne.
Got some pause, and I want to lay pause on people. Oh my goodness. Like I said, once again, it is work in progress. And so, you know, and I'm practicing really looking at it, you know, in all facets. You know, so the first thing, you know, for me is, like you said, when I find myself in the situations, is going back and asking, like, what is it that I really want to achieve here? You know, what's the outcome that I desire? And the way that I'm thinking initially to go ahead and do it, laying the hands, is laying the hands really going to get me what I want? And I'm going to tell you, like 100% of the time, the answer is no.
It's
Okay.
just going to feel good in that moment.
Whole lot good. But the answer is no, right? And truth be told, I'll probably have a whole lot more mess to clean up than initially what I started out to do. So that's not it. So what's the outcome and that I want? And then going through it, like, what's the best way for me to get to the outcome? Like, what do I need to do? Who do I need to be at this moment to get me to what it is I desire? And like I said, it's the practice. Okay. So can I do that when the emotion shows up that it's anger and frustration? Can I also do that when I feel fear? And I know that that's recently one of the things that I'm working through. And so for our super achievers, you know, we all, as leaders, we're all going to attempt things. And the first time you do stuff, probably the 10th time you do it, you're still not going to get it. You're not going to get it right. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes up, you know, for you. Should I not do the thing anymore? Should I just give up and quit, throw my hands up? Should I just go ahead and pull my blanket over my head and go to sleep for 3 days? Sometimes I do feel like that. But once again, like, what if I do that, what is that going to get me? It's probably not going to get me where I want to go. So it's like, who do I have to be to overcome the fear? Okay, so that means I have to go ahead and get up, dust myself off, try again, find a new way to do the thing. Okay, analyze the whole pathway. What is it? What's the outcome? And am I willing to work through what I need to do to get to the outcome? And in that, like I said, the great conversations is once you know it's fair that you're facing, they're like, oh, okay, so how do we handle fear? Well, take the big things. And we really had that conversation this week. If you're afraid of it, take the big thing because you're afraid of the big thing. So how can you take the big thing and break the big thing down into small bite-sized pieces? So when you take that step is not a big, scary step. So that's a process of working through,
Yeah.
fear. But if you don't understand and know that that's what you're dealing with, then you continue to remain stuck. And so for me, it's not just controlling anger, right? But is able to apply it to, all of those other emotions. Because I love
Love
what
it.
you said, like it's a process, right? Like once you can name it, there's probably a process. Somebody has probably studied it out there, will give you tips, tricks, hacks, and you know where to look. So
And I love the fact that you said it's a process because it really is a practice.
mhm,
And as good as you may get, there will be a situation that will put you on your butt.
mhm,
And you'll be like, oh man, I gotta step away. And I really want to highlight that because at the end of the day, we're humans
mhm.
and humans are emotional beings. And mastery is about not having those emotions
Right.
run the show, make the decisions, and be in charge of your life. It's about managing those emotions so you can powerfully choose and move towards the outcome you desire. So, it's such a great conversation because I think it's not one that people are having.
Right.
Um, and it's not necessarily one that's being looked at. However, there's so much going on in the world today that I think it's one that we should have more of.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because, like I said, once you're able to name exactly what's going on, then we're able to have access to what it is that we truly desire. What's the outcome that we want?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I'm going to ask you to read, let us know what the message of the week is because it's from your guy.
No.
And, I'm just going to let you do the
Yes,
honors.
this is one of one of the favorite things that I do. So our thought of the week comes from Brendan Burchard, and he says, "When emotional mastery is achieved, the heart trusts the mind, and the mind trusts the heart." And Suzanne, I think this is so perfect because it's that thing when we're able to get in alignment,
Mhm.
then things become so much more clearer. Our journey becomes a whole lot easier. And so it's to be able to get the heart and the mind in alignment to move forward.
I always say when the heart and the mind are in alignment, you're in the zone.
Yeah.
You're in that heart zone, right? And I think what he's saying is so powerful because magic happens with such honesty when you're there. So everyone, you have been sitting down with Suzanne Hart and Sharia Hodge. We were so excited that you spent this hour with us. We will be back here next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until then, please know you are brilliant. Know you are oh so very special. And we do this work because the world is waiting. Blessings, and we will talk to you soon.
Take care.